Werewolves are one of the most enduring monsters in human folklore, but did you know that there are actually many different kinds of werewolves? Depending on where you are in the world, they might be called something else or have different abilities. And before Hollywood came out with its own version of this shapeshifter, there were much darker stories about lycanthropes. 5. The Lycaean Curse of Greece. The Greek word lycaon means wolf, and it's used by the ancient Greeks to refer to a curse that transformed people into beasts. In their mythology, it was believed that ordinary humans could be turned into Lycaeans, which is the plural form of Lycaean, by various methods. The most common was through witchcraft, either because someone wanted revenge or simply because the witch had a taste for blood. If a person ate certain herbs while under the full moon, they could also transform themselves into a wolf. This was seen as an extreme form of lycanthropy. While being under a curse was usually hereditary and resulted in the victim becoming a werewolf every full moon, turning yourself into a wolf-like monster was an act of free will. It was thought that these self-made Lycaons could only change back with a counterspell. But the spell was hard to learn and required perfect pronunciation. Otherwise, the individual would remain a Lycaon forever. If you say the name Lycaon out loud, it sounds kind of like lycanthropy, which is appropriate since that's what it refers to, but it's also similar to the Latin word lupus, meaning wolf. So you can imagine why the ancient Greeks chose this word to describe people cursed to live as wolves. There's even an ancient Greek myth about a man named Lycaon who was punished for trying to trick Zeus into drinking poisoned wine. As a result, he was transformed into a wolf and forced to roam the mountains alone for all eternity. He became known as Lycaon, the founder of the Lycaon race, a monster who haunts Greece to this day. Number 4. The Volkodlak of Eastern Europe. The word werewolf comes from the Old English weork wolf and the word eldfan, which means man. This translates literally to man-wolf, which is fitting considering what werewolves are. In Eastern Europe, the term for werewolf is Volkodlak, which combines elements from Russian and Slavic languages that mean wolf and sun. This suggests that the werewolf is not just an animal, but a member of the family. It was believed that the child of a werewolf was born with the ability to shift into a wolf at will and could pass this gift on to his children. However, if a normal person married into the family, their children would not inherit the lycanthropic trait. In some cases, the ability to transform into a wolf was seen as a blessing rather than a curse. During the Middle Ages, there were tales of good werewolves who protected their villages by fighting evil werewolves. For example, there's a story about a young girl who was saved by a werewolf from drowning. In return, she married him in his human form, and he was able to break his curse thanks to her love. Obviously, there were still plenty of bad werewolves around during this time period, and while some were just misunderstood creatures, others were pure evil. Villagers living near the Carpathian Mountains claimed that they had to protect themselves against packs of werewolves who came out to hunt at night. Sometimes they fought off these lycanthropes with wooden stakes, which may have inspired Bram Stoker's decision to use stakes and sunlight to kill Dracula in his novel Dracula. 3. The Berserkers of Norse lore. In Norse mythology, berserkers were legendary Viking warriors who went into battle in a trance-like state. They were said to be able to fight without fear or fatigue, and their strength and ferocity were unmatched. According to legend, berserkers could transform into wolves or bears during battle, which made them even more formidable opponents. This wasn't exactly the same as modern werewolves. While they did sometimes attack people, berserkers were generally more wild animals, ferocious and powerful, but without the intelligence of a human. Berserkers were associated with the god Odin, and were often members of the Aesir, a group of deities that included Thor and Loki. They were honored by the Vikings for their courage and skill in battle, and many stories and poems were written about them. One famous berserker was Ragnar Lothbrok, a legendary Viking warrior who went on a series of raids in the 860s. He was said to have led a band of berserkers who fought against the Northumbrians in England and the Franks in France. Another well-known berserker was Amleth, who is said to have killed his uncle, King Horwendil, after he had murdered his father. The story of Amleth is thought to be the inspiration for Shakespeare's play Hamlet. Despite their fierce reputation, berserkers were not necessarily evil creatures. They were simply warriors who fought for glory and honor. However, like all monsters, they were feared by those who opposed them. Their animalistic qualities made them unpredictable and dangerous opponents, and their ferocity in battle was unmatched. 2. The Rougarou of French Louisiana. If you visit New Orleans, you might hear some spooky stories about vampires and ghosts. But did you know that there are also plenty of werewolves lurking in the shadows? The French word for werewolf is loup-garou, or rougarou, and it comes from the Gaelic word raugart, which means horrible wolf. This creature is often depicted as a hairy, vicious beast that preys on livestock and small animals, but it can also attack humans. Rougarous are said to live in the swamps and bayous of Louisiana, where they prowl at night looking for food. They're often seen as solitary creatures, but they can sometimes be found in packs. Like other werewolves, the rougarou is usually said to be the result of a curse. It's often passed down through families and can be passed on to children. However, some people believe that rougarous are simply evil spirits that have taken on a wolf-like form. If you want to avoid becoming a rougarou, you should stay away from cemeteries at night. This is because the spirit of the dead can rise from their graves and turn people into rougarous. If you do see a rougarou, don't try to run away. Instead, you should stand your ground and make yourself look big. This will scare the creature away and it will leave you alone. Of course, if you do encounter one of these monsters, it won't really help to know what to do, because the real thing is much worse than anything you might read in a book. 1. The skinwalkers of indigenous America. The Navajo call them Yi-Naldlushi, which means with it, it goes on all fours. The name comes from the way that skinwalkers move. They crawl on all fours like animals and can take on all kinds of animal forms. Some Native American cultures believe that skinwalkers are evil witches who have the power to transform themselves into wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, bears, or owls. The Hopi call them Pokutukutsi, which means those who dance. These creatures are said to be able to fly through the air like birds and can assume the form of any animal they choose. When they fly, it's said to be a sign that someone close to you will die. Other Native Americans call these creatures Wetzel goblins, or simply werewolves. And many cultures believe that skinwalkers have supernatural powers that allow them to control other animals and even people. There are also stories about skinwalkers who can shapeshift into human form and prey on young girls. The Navajo believe that skinwalkers were once ordinary people, but they chose to follow a path of evil magic that allowed them to become animals. This magic is passed down from one generation to the next, and each new skinwalker must learn its secrets and practice them in order to maintain their powers. The Navajo believe that skinwalkers are the worst kind of witches, and they're shunned by society and feared by everyone. They can only be stopped by a medicine man, and even then, it's a difficult task that requires great skill and courage. So if you ever hear the cry of a coyote in the middle of the night, don't be surprised if a skinwalker is watching you from the shadows. Thanks for watching. Which of these ancient werewolves scared you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories from history's most haunted places. See you next time. Bye.